This webinar is this webinar is influenced by the recently launched third edition of the State of South Africa Fathers Report. The fourth chapter of this powerful research document explores the role of religion in fatherhood to trace the linkages and its importance. As such, during this webinar, we'll be discussing why religion plays an important role in positive fatherhood, not only in South Africa, but across the African continent. So some of the themes that we will explore during this webinar include sharing an overview of the 2024 State of South Africa Fathers Report, with a special focus on the fourth chapter of the report, which is titled Religion and Fatherhood. We will also aim to explore an overview of the lived experiences from civil society as well as faith leaders themselves in connecting religion and fatherhood. We are also hoping to hear from all of you in the webinar, from a number of organizations and faith leaders who are present, who are deeply embedded in father-focused work. And towards the end, hopefully, if time allows, we'll ask for questions and reflections from anyone in the room. I would also like to encourage you all to use the chat to offer your thoughts, insights, and reflections throughout the time that we're together. This will enable us to, have a rich conversation and engagement together. And also, if time is allowing, we will be able to unmute you to speak and share your own experiences or insights to the discussions that we're going to be having. So without wasting much time, I'd like to introduce to you our speakers for today, which I hope they are in the room. I'll start with Dr. Vessel from Equimundo. Dr. Vessel, if you can unmute your mic and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, and Paul. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vessel. I also want to reach out to our next speaker, Mr. Wells Mtali, who is the MenEngage Malawi chairperson. Please, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hello and greetings, everyone. Warmly greetings from Malawi. Glad to be here. Hope we'll have a nice time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mtali. I would also like to introduce to you Rev Nathan from the Anglican Church in Uganda. Please, Rev, unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Rev, I'm not sure if your mic is on. Okay. All right. I think we may be having a bit of technical challenges for our panelists to speak, but without wasting much time, like I said, please feel free to engage with us on the chat box. If you have any questions or contributions that you may want to have, please do use the chat for more discussions. So without wasting much time, can I please invite Dr. Vessel to share with us an overview of the State of South Africa Fathers Report. Dr. Vessel, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I hope I am able to share my screen. I was just checking with Amu if that's possible. I'd like to show some slides from my side. Great,
Are you
there we
able
go.
to share? Okay,
Yes, I am. Thank you.
right. Thanks,
Um,
Susan.
so once again, thank you for the invitation, colleagues at Sonke. It's wonderful to join this space. I'm going to give a brief overview of the State of South Africa's Fathers Report. And as you can see on the screen, the theme for the current report is shifting narratives of fatherhood. And this is a double meaning. We are both talking about the fact that we are observing how the way people are talking about fatherhood is changing in the country, but also we're hoping to influence how people are talking about fatherhood in South Africa. This report is the third in a series of reports. The report is published every 3 years. The previous one was in 2021, and the first one was in 2018. And colleagues who have seen the hard copies might have noticed the trend that they tend to become thicker. So the the first one was quite thin, the second one was even thicker, and then this one is the thickest yet. We're at 208 pages. So hopefully we can reduce the number of pages so that it also becomes easier and less intimidating to read for the next one. But the idea is that the report tracks fatherhood in South Africa over the long term. So this is a longitudinal project. And the main audience are such as yourselves, civil society members, but also policymakers and the general public. And one of the narratives that we have started to speak about quite a lot is to shift the focus in in the previous report, actually 2021, um, towards a broader understanding of fatherhood. On the left-hand side on the diagram, you can see quite a limited focus, which is how we often think about fatherhood, that co-residence, in other words, living together in the same household with a child, is the same as high involvement. And we also think about non-residents or not living with the child as low involvement. Whereas on the right-hand side, you can see that, in fact, the truth is that there are quite often non-resident fathers who do have high involvement in childcare, and there are, at the same time, co-resident fathers who sometimes have low involvement in childcare. So the idea of this diagram is just to bring the point across that we are not only thinking about who lives with whom, but that we also are shifting the conversation towards involvement. And I think in the context of faith communities and religious community support for parenting, involvement is often an emphasis that emerges. So I think that's also in line with the conversation that we are having today. So having said that we are interested in involvement, we do have data about South Africa at a national scale about co-residence. So who do children live with? And the graph on the page at the moment is simply an explanation of where we get our numbers from. So when we say children live with their biological fathers, we mean that we are talking about children who are living with both parents or living with their father only. So the number you'll see on the screen is 31.3% added to 44.3% makes 35.6%. So that's the amount of children who are living with, the percentage of children who are living with their biological fathers. And a major theme for us in this report is to also see who children are living with that could become father or parental figures in their life. And to demonstrate that point, I've put this graph up here. I'm going to unpack it. There's quite a lot in here. One can spend a whole hour on this, a full webinar on this. So I hope to get through all of it, but let me try. What we're looking at here is the yellow lines are the percentages of children living with um, biological fathers in the same household. And the fact that fathers migrate away from a household for work is one of the elements that's well established in the literature as informing the separation of fathers from their families. Um, but one might have the impression that that has improved after 1994, whereas in fact, in 1996, it was the best yet recorded. It was at 45% of children living with their fathers. And it has steadily become lower over the years until 2023. Um, and then in 2023, we have the lowest co-residence yet recorded. So the second thing I want to point out here is that the bumps in the trend, where it goes up, so where men tend to spend more time with their families at home, is during times of economic constraint. So in 2008 and in 2020, the financial crisis in 2008 and COVID in 2020, we saw that the yellow graphs spike. So in other words, when there's no work available, men go home. And that highlights a very worrying dynamic that it seems to be that our society is set up that men tend to earn their income away from their families or away from their homes. But then the darker bars, the brown ones, you'll see starting in 1996 at 31%, and they've gone up steadily over the years. They represent children who live with a man who is not their biological father. So these are brothers, uncles, grandfathers, mother's new partner, or a tenant in the house. And that number has actually gone up. In fact, since, as that magnifying glass shows, since 2010, more children live with men who are not their father than children who live with men who are their father, biologically speaking. And that's really interesting. And I believe that this area of the interactions between children with men who they co-reside with has not been researched enough. And that emerged as an important theme in the report. And it also brought the point across that children do not live on a strange planet where there are no men around. Most children actually do live with men. The question is, are these men, what is the role that these men are playing in the children's lives? Um, on the positive side, we hope that they could be involved in care. It's quite likely, unfortunately, that they're not if we look at time use surveys. On the negative side, in addition to neglect, there might actually be the risk of violence. We simply don't know enough about the interaction between these men and the children. So that is this graph, and I hope I've not overwhelmed you with all of the percentages and statistics. What I do want to highlight in the context of father figures, and particularly in a religious community context where somebody takes on a fathering role for a child, we have this two sets of data from the State of the World's Fathers data set, where we collected responses from 800 people in South Africa about a range of things. And one of them was, what are the interactions that men and women have with children? How involved, and what are the types of involvement between men and women and children? And on the left-hand side, we asked men and women about the children that they regard as their biological children that they have conceived. And on the right-hand side, we asked them about children that they care for, but they are not related to as the biological parents. And on the left-hand side, I think that's quite intuitive to see how highly involved biological parents are with their children. But what's new and what's quite exciting is to see on the right-hand side that there are, in fact, a range of activities that men and women are involved in the care for children. Sorry, but that thumbs up was unintentional. Particularly playing with children and providing financial support to children that are not biologically related to the man. So there's a lot more to unpack there, but just to say that the initial data is quite encouraging. I'm looking at the time and I see I've got just under 2 minutes left, so I'm moving to wrap up and to just say that one of the key themes is, of course, the chapter on fatherhood and faith and religion's influence on paternal roles. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because the other speakers will delve into that more deeply. I just wanted to end with some of the key takeaways and to say that, firstly, in South Africa, family structures are really diverse, and the extended family has mostly been the norm. The nuclear family is actually quite new and is the anomaly. Most family households have a grandmother, an uncle, a brother, a grandfather. And the question is, how involved are men in those networks, in the extended networks, in care? Secondly, we wanted to be really clear about this importance of the difference between physical presence, co-residing with the child, versus the emotional engagement of fathers as an important goal. And thirdly, that a significant number of fathers do not live with their biological children. At the moment, it seems mostly due to economical circumstances. So while we often urge individuals to make changes in their lives, often the individuals' life choices are really informed by their structural environment, particularly their economic environment. And then the hope and the dream is that we can encourage those men who are living with children, who are proximal to children, to become involved in the child's life and become father figures, or known as social fathers. I think that's all from my side. I'm going to pause there and pass it back to you. Thank you so much, Umpo.
Thank you so much, Doc. Very insightful, and I'm sure that colleagues on the call will have areas of clarity or questions around the report. And for me, it's quite exciting to see how the report has evolved from, the first State of South Africa Fathers, where we were talking about the ATM fathers, and how now we're talking more about the caring fathers, fathers who are able to play with their children. So thank you so much for sharing with us the report. Dr. Vessel is one of the editors of the report since the first edition. So please feel free to ask questions on the chat box if you have any areas of clarity. Thanks you so much, Vessel. I know that you spoke quite a lot of issues around, the family structure and the role really that civil society can play in shaping some of these narratives. So I want to call upon Mr. Wells Mtali, who is the chairperson of MenEngage Malawi, to take us through the role that civil society does with faith institutions. I know they've done quite a number of work in Malawi through MenCare. So Mr. Wells, over to you. Please take us through what you have in store for us. If you can just show us your video, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, so that we can see your face while you do the presentation. Over to you, Mr. Mtali.
All right. I hope you're able to see me, Paul, and the rest of the members. So I think I'll start from where Doc just left. We have a problem here, because it all starts from the way people have understood the Bible and the Quran. I think in the Bible, men have been assigned the work of providing for the family, whereas women have been relegated to the care work, where they're actually looking at the children and how the expenses at home are run, the day-to-day chores at home. That's what women have been left with. Now, what does this mean? It means, whatever the case, the man has to leave the home as early as possible and come back as late as possible, as long as he brings something home. What we may not have really figured out is the absence that the father creates for himself and the children during the time that is away from home has actually brought us a number of effects, but I'll come to that later. In our setup, we still believe that religion, culture, and politics command a lot of respect in our lives, and actually they help us in making decisions. So the decisions that we make are literally based on what does my culture say and what does my religion say about this. And in most cases, religion looks at men as those that must provide. And even in most churches, when it is time to contribute for something in the church, the whole church looks up to men for them to provide for whatever need is there in the church. And this has left a lot of men with huge responsibilities, because no matter what, whether they have the capacity or not, they just have to provide for the family. That is why men will accept to be away from the home, just like Doc has mentioned. They will accept to live away from their families. is simply because they want to make ends meet, to earn something which they can provide for their families. And this has actually brought a conflict in terms of relationship between the father figure in the house and the rest of the family, to such an extent that in most cases, fathers, in brackets men, remain strangers in the lives of the wife and the children, because there is hardly time where the man or the father can interact with the children and possibly the spouse. And this cuts across the high working class and the low casual workers. They all have the same problem. If we go in universities, you find professors who work even up to around 9, 10 p.m. They leave home at 6, they arrive home around 10, 11 p.m. Even if we go, in big industries, it is the same case. So this is a problem that cuts across. So in Malawi, what did we do? We have areas where we're working under the Power to Youth project, where we've actually set up networks of traditional leaders and faith leaders so that we can use them as a vehicle to bring about the MenCare concept and positive parenting for both men and women. But interestingly, faith leaders, the reverends, and I know I have my fellow reverend here as a panelist, have also accepted that the nature of their work as men of God also creates a similar problem, because they are all over the place, making sure that Mr. Mutali's family is working where there are problems, they'll come and mediate each and every day. From morning to sunset, they're all over the place trying to sort out marital issues in other families. When in his own family, the wife or the spouse and children don't really feel their presence. So this is the problem that we have. So in one of our impact areas in Machinga, after we had carried out a training on Power to Youth, I approached the sheikh of the mosque, because there is a mosque quite close. And I said, can I not attend your prayers and talk about, parenting after the prayer? So they said, oh yes, you're welcome. So that was the starting point of engaging the faith leaders. So indeed, I went into the mosque after the prayers. The sheikh, announced that we have a guest here who has got something to share with us. And I shared the concept of positive parenting, because in most cases, men, apart from providing, what else do they do? Men are left to be disciplinarians in the homes. And that exacerbates the problem, because now children look at you as someone who only comes into play when there is a disciplinary issue to be tackled. That's the other problem. So we engage the mosque and all the participants in the mosque. We had nice times. And then we moved, we had another congregation the 70th day. I don't know if we have it in South Africa. They invited me to talk to the main gathering. So they have a gathering of men only where they talk about their issues. And they said, Mr. Mtali, can you come and address us on parenting issues? So I went. The discussion was very, very rich to the extent that they said, no, I think we need to bring this discussion to the whole congregation. So I went and I held that discussion with the congregation, the whole congregation. And in fact, this coming Sunday, I've also been invited by the same church, because now they have a regional meeting of all their, faithfuls, or where they will gather, I think, from 6, if not 7 districts at one place. And I've been given an hour to talk about positive parenting. So we thought this is another way of reaching out to men, because yes, the Bible and Quran places responsibilities on men to provide for the home. But the relationship between the father figure in the house and the children is also very, very important. Children must not only look at the father as a disciplinarian or as an ATM machine, like Paul has mentioned. It is all over the place, even here. So the role of the father only comes into play when there is something that needs to be funded. And the father thinks by funding that need, he's okay, he's good enough to be a father. And we're saying, no. There is more to be a father than just providing for the home. Children need their time. It is also good for the father to know how the children behave. in the absence of the father, the mother, or in their presence. It is also good for them to know. But what else? We are saying these faith leaders should also cascade this information to their faithfuls each and every time when they have their own gatherings, whether gatherings to do with men only and boys. If they cannot invite one of us to go and address them, at least they must have the basic concept of positive parenting, where they can actually go and talk about it to their fellow faithfuls. And this has really seemed to be working, because now we have a network of committees in 2 districts where we're working. And the fact that we've created need for the church, to have us go and talk about this really proves a point that this is an area where we must really put much effort. Because, as I'm winding up, we have a situation where in my old age, I'm getting old, I need the support of my children, but the distance that I created between myself and children, doesn't allow me to sit down with my children and say, but you know what, this is what I need to do to help me with. This distance becomes so wide. Whereas if you look at the women or the mother, even at my level, at my age, you find me very close to my mother than I am to my father. And each and every time my mother calls for help, I'll be very, very quick to offer that help to my mother as opposed to the father. So these are some of the things that we are currently doing, and we are quite sure, time allowing, we'll explore the other ways of how we can better engage these faith leaders, because we know faith leaders meet their faithfuls each and every weekend. And so if they can be messages tailored for the faith leaders to advance positive parenting, we believe that this can bring change. Because like I said in my opening, religion and culture, play a big role in terms of how people make their decisions. And if it comes from the church that this is how we can parent our children, this is how we can be positive fathers in our homes, we can be present in the lives of our children, I think it will go a long way in addressing a lot of social ills that we're experiencing right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mtali, for this overview of how civil society really has been engaged with the faith leaders and faith communities. I'm sure some of us in the webinar, I see fellow colleagues like Dr. Deliwe and Elise, who we've worked really quite broadly with engaging faith and religious leaders. I'm sure you also share the same sentiments as Mr. Mtali. And one thing that I kind of admire is how the church of late is really allowing and accepting the civil society to be incorporated into the churches and the mosques. So without wasting much time, it will be nice to hear from Rev Nathan as a faith leader from the Anglican Church to share with us some of his experiences on how the work around positive fatherhood in Uganda, and I'm sure he'll be probably speaking across the continent on how are you as faith leaders really encouraging men to be, positive fathers, encouraging them to be caring and nurturing in their families. So over to you, Rev, if you can unmute yourself and show us who you are just for a minute or two. Rev Nathan.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, dear team. I cannot see where I can share my my screen so that I can turn on the video. Please, the admin. Okay. I hope I can be seen. Good afternoon, dear team. Reverend Nathan Balirwana Mugalu here. I am a priest working with the Church of Uganda. I am here currently in Uganda, Kampala. I am a national male champion on parenting. I am a serving priest. And I thank God that we have this opportunity and chance to be here and share a number of nuggets. Sorry, I've been being disturbed. This is the Holy Week, so I am attending to my students here, giving them devotion and sending them off for the Easter holiday. So, for purposes of the connection, I will now turn off my photo, and I use only audio for clarity. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I am glad to be here and share a number of nuggets with us this afternoon. Currently, I work in Uganda, and I work in a number of districts in Uganda. And part of my job is to see that men participate in parenting, men participate in family issues, but also men participate in health issues. Therefore, my experience as a priest, it's not so common that priests engage in some of these activities. So, but however, Uganda's case is different. I've had the experience from South Africa. Uganda's case is different. In Uganda, when you move around and meet 10 children along the way, only 3 children stay with their fathers. 7 children don't stay with their fathers. Unfortunately, from the 7 children that don't stay with their fathers, it's only 4 children who know that, well, my father is around, but my father stays maybe in another place. Children don't know who their fathers and where they actually come from. So that is the Ugandan case. We have a crisis because the majority of the children in Uganda are taken care of by their mothers or other significant others like grandmothers, like aunties, but majority of the children are raised by women. So this is my experience. On Sunday, they are not there. Majority of the fathers in Uganda stay in bars, they live in bars. So they live in bars, some of them in funerals, others in functions. So the strategy that I normally use to get the fathers on board is bringing them and finding them where they are. Men are found where they are because in most cases, when we wait for them to come to formal gatherings, they do not come anywhere. Then, when we get to those fathers, we try as much as possible to engage them because some of the experience is some fathers sometimes say, when we go to the mosque, I'm not sure about the situation in South Africa, but when we go to the home, we are wrong. When we go to the mosque, we are wrong. When we go to the funeral, we are wrong. When we go to a function, we are wrong. So the question is, when can fathers be right? So designing messages that bring fathers on board without necessarily blaming them and without necessarily making them victims is a strategy that I use here to get fathers. The other issue is engaging the children themselves, because sometimes fathers are not at home because of a number of challenges, which challenges can only be sorted if we engage the significant others of those men. So we engage the family through the family-centered approach. Then the other issue is caring about the men themselves, because it is very clear that depressed men cannot give us good children. Depressed men cannot give us good fathers. depressed men cannot give us good role models and good examples. So what we do is we care so much about the experience of fathers, their experiences, what they go through, what the challenges they face, and also attending to their general mental health situation. Because at the end of the day, the fathers, sometimes they go through a number of challenges, which they don't. So what do we do? Male action groups. What do we do in our communities? Male champions there to mobilize the fathers to attend to attend to their father duties, but also attend to the situations that they may face. The other issue is there are some fathers who actually come to churches. So creating a conducive environment for the men when they come, designing messages that are suitable for them and also attending to them. The issue of community mobilization, because in Uganda, primarily, fatherhood is about religion, fatherhood is about culture. Fatherhood is about religion, fatherhood is about culture. So, religion, and also engaging them in a number of activities, especially community mobilization. Because normally it is the community where they stay, it is the community where they stay, and it is the community that normally prevents them from performing their father duties. So community-based programming is one of the measures that we use here when attending to fathers, when engaging fathers. Then the other issue is engaging the different policymakers, especially the duty bearers. In my work as a religious leader, I do not only work alone, but engaging with the different stakeholders, the leaders, the community leaders, religious leaders, and so forth. So many challenges that we face. For instance, the negative masculine thoughts, negative cultural norms. We have a tendency here where fathers think that taking care of children is only them, and it's only for wives, it's only for women. Then we have some more issues of polygamy. We have issues of alcohol and drug abuse among the fathers. Then also we have the high levels of mental health challenges to the fathers themselves. So those are some of the challenges. However, I can gladly report that we are making great strides in bringing fatherhood on board. We are making great strides in ensuring that we use biblical principles and religious principles to bring fathers on board. And I'm also glad to report that we have a number of father champions that help to bring our fathers on board, especially in the communities where we are. We still have many challenges around the women-headed families, single mother families, and also homes that have never seen a father. We are determined to continue with the fatherhood experience despite the challenges, but we are glad that a number of principles and a number of mechanisms are actually working, and we are improving fatherhood in the lives of children, in the lives of family, and the general idea of the entire community. Yeah, thank you for now. I'm glad to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rev, for this insightful presentation. I think if we were to look 20 or so years back, we would have never imagined a reverend like you speaking so positively about, positive fatherhood and how to engage men and boys in these conversations and linking them with the religious spaces. So thank you so much for sharing with us some of the amazing work that you are doing in Uganda, especially on the mental health even for fathers. I think some of us take it for granted that our fathers are superheroes and they are supposed to endure everything that they go through. But I'm glad that there's a lot of programs and projects that you are doing as the church to ensure that fathers are getting the necessary support. So without wasting much time, I would also want to call upon Rev Bafana Kumalo from Sonke Gender Justice, who's going to give us a keynote speech about the work that has been done, about the conversations that we've been talking about from the first speaker until where we are now. So over to you, Rev.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks, Mpho. It's a pleasure to be in this space with colleagues as we journey in attempts to try and strengthen social cohesion in our communities and particularly in our homes. And happy Holy Week to everyone. Religion, as we all know, plays a very important role in the lives of communities, especially in our region and also here in South Africa. Our statistics, South Africa indicates that over 80% people profess at least to be Christian in South Africa, and the rest are affiliated with other faiths, Muslims, Buddhism, Jewish, Baha'i, Hinduism, African religion, etc. So by and large, you would not be faulted to argue that most South Africans are religious people. We also have a sizable number of African religious traditions across the length and breadth of our country. Now, all the above have a great influence in the norm formation and policy development around what happens in society, how we carry ourselves, and how we manage our lives. Consequently, all the faith denominations present various understandings of fatherhood. It is important to understand this in the context of our conversation today. In the chapter that Sonke contributed to the recent State of the South African Fathers report, we make the following observations. Religious institutions shape fatherhood in terms of norms and societal expectations. Christianity especially encourages fathers to be spiritual leaders, decision makers, providers, and nurturers. And of course, these have their implications. Some of the speakers have already alluded to some of those implications. What does it mean when a father, for instance, is not able to provide? Does that mean that he is no longer a father? And I'm sure we can pick this conversation later. We noted also that within the Islam community, there's an emphasis of fathers as moral guides, as protectors, and as providers. African traditions shape fatherhood with cultural, spiritual, and community roles. So it's clear from what we have been able to glean, at least in our paper, that religious institutions can play a crucial role in supporting families and promoting family well-being. What is common, of course, among all of these is the common thread that suggests that various faith groups have the self-understanding of the concept of fatherhood and its role in society. Undoubtedly, religion plays a very pivotal role in shaping masculinities, at least in the context of South Africa. This is also apparent in how the South African society has responded to the challenge of HIV, for instance, mainly from a corrective rather conservative patriarchal view, which is not surprising if one looks at how our interventions have had some challenges, which we think as you embark on interventions on HIV, you need to take these understandings into cognizance so that it helps improve your programming. Because if you miss the point around how societies views notions of masculinities or even the role of men generally, your interventions may fall short of what is intended. Despite the evidence that churches present, the conventional ideas of masculinity that we see in young men and fathers is that there is very little examination of how to challenge these practices that in fact present notions of fatherhood that are selling this concept very short, and how we should hold men accountable for maintaining gendered power relations and how men respond to violence, especially gender-based violence. It is our consideration that unless we are able to acknowledge the influence that religion and ideas that we find from the different denominations influence self-understanding of manhood and how it then plays itself out in how men relate to their children, relate to their partners, and relate to others in society. The church, for instance, places moral authority on fathers while not providing adequate support to ensure that fathers are supported themselves to lead their families positively. Mpho just alluded to the fact that many men struggle with mental health, and several studies in South Africa have shown that men are navigating a very treacherous path on how to deal with mental health, especially in a society where mental health is stigmatized, where it is seen as a sign of weakness. We see many men not coming forward when they are confronted with these challenges in their personal lives, be it depression, stress levels, which leads to even more challenging episodes of acute depression. Indigenous African religions have a strong connection to a wealth of traditional religious beliefs. These beliefs are intertwined within the everyday life in terms of cultural expressions, social values, making it challenging to separate traditional religious beliefs from social values. The traditional adherence to religious principles, such as goodness and kindness, can briefly be summarized as Ubuntu. And as we all know, in African cosmology, the centrality of Ubuntu is embedded and very, very important, because Ubuntu already defines how we need to relate to each other, how we need to relate to others, and how we also need to carry ourselves. Therefore, indigenous African religions are inherently spiritual and closely tied to cultural practices that unfortunately promote patriarchy and have a clearly defined role for fatherhood. And that's the nub of the matter. And if I may say, this we see across religions. The very notion that fatherhood is seen in a particular frame. You know, men are supposed to be providers, men are supposed to be leaders, men are supposed to be the ones who protect the family. So there's a lot of burden that is placed on men, sometimes unfairly so, and then has the consequences where men fall short because society expects them to carry themselves in a particular way, even when the cards are stacked against what is happening in their own lives. The absence and low involvement of fathers in families is a serious social issue in South Africa, with far-reaching consequences for families and society. The Human Research Science Council produces reports periodically and raises some of these challenges in our society, where if you go to Home Affairs, most birth certificates will not have the name of the father. And there are many reasons for that, and we have covered this in the previous State of the South African Fathers reports. Our research, of course, broadly within the State of Fathers report, does make the point that even though biological fathers may not be present in the lives of their children, as Vessel pointed out earlier, we've also picked up that you have what we call social fathers, uncles who are stepping in, grandfathers who step in and provide that support where the fathers are absent. But this does not decry the fact that we do need, I think, to look at mechanisms both within society through religious formations on how can we indeed support men to be present in the lives of their children, so that we do not have what Reverend Mutali has indicated is happening in Uganda with absentee fathers, or the colleague from Malawi who also gave us an expression of how there are challenges about the fathers in their context. Because I don't think that children generally want to have father figures in their lives. Yes, it's important that they have social fathers, but I do think that the first prize, of course, is to have your biological father who is present in your life, because that does have a lot of spin-offs in terms of developmental attributes. The challenges, therefore, of absent fathers does cause family disruptions and societal shifts, which require a multifaceted approach that involves religious institutions, involves government in terms of policies. For instance, in terms of our interventions, as colleagues would know, in our MenCare program, we have been pushing for the policies, progressive policies on parental leave, geared towards ensuring that we encourage, the presence of fathers in the lives of their children. And I think we are on the right course if we are able to get more traction in our governments for these progressive policies that acknowledge the role that fathers must play in the lives of their children. It is also important that there's an enhanced engagement with civil society, with religious communities especially, because there's a lot of mutuality in terms of sharing of information, of ideas, of models that we can both benefit from. Civil society does a lot of work in many of our communities, as we have already heard in this webinar, which religious leaders can benefit from. And I was encouraged to hear a colleague saying they were invited to go and give a talk in a mosque. And we need, I think, to strive for all of us, where it is possible, to reach out to religious communities so that we can make these interventions where you have large communities that meet religiously every week and are able to focus on challenges of society and begin to navigate their space in finding long-lasting and meaningful solutions to some of the challenges that we are confronted with in our societies. I am certain that with a lot of these interventions that seek to pull us together in finding ways of improving the state of fatherhood in our communities, it will indeed have a long-lasting contribution in national cohesion, in developmental positives for our children, and also creating harmony in our families. And so in brief, we conclude in our chapter in the State of Fathers report around the notion of fatherhood and religion, that religion does play a significant role in shaping fatherhood in South Africa by providing guidance, support, and moral framework for fathers to fulfill their responsibilities. The challenges of absentee fathers, of course, we argue does cause these disruptions, which we need to negate so that fathers can be available and play their role. But in order for fathers to do that, we argue that there's need for support, for nurturing, for skilling, so that fathers are able indeed to be better fathers. There is a need for religious institutions to partner with civil society organizations, and this can create a supportive environment for fathers so that they can be more responsive for their parental responsibilities. And we can cultivate a non-violent culture which leads to better fatherhood practices and thriving families. It is also our view that there's a need for an integrated approach that includes working broadly with those that are doing this work already on the ground so that we do not reinvent the wheel. Where there are things that are working and working well, let us rather ride on that and build on what is already working, and we know that it makes a difference. I do believe that across the various religious and cultural practices, one thing is very certain, that the role of a father is a key one, that of being a protector of their children, of being a provider, and of being a mentor. And by provision here, we are not talking only just about material things. We are talking about emotional investment. Many of our children require presence, require a sound quality relationship with their fathers. And we see in the work that we do that where fathers spend a lot of time with their children, in their families, the spin-offs are enormous in how that contributes to harmony and growth and better health outcomes in families. As I conclude, I want to leave you with this quotation from Frederick Douglass, who says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." I think when we invest in fathers that are able to have quality relations with their children, that investment will certainly pay off in our society in the most meaningful way as we produce better fathers for tomorrow, as we produce better children that are capable of really rising to the occasion and achieving greater heights in their own development. And that will benefit all of us in society. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Rev, for that powerful speech. I'm sure I echo everyone in the room that the points that you bring about really touch on some of our lived experiences, not only as communities, but even as faith leaders, as civil society ourselves. There's quite a lot that you spoke about, and going to open up to see if there's anyone who wants to share their thoughts or ask any questions to the speakers, because our speakers have really spoken a lot about the role of religion in fatherhood. And I think one of the things, Rev, when you were speaking about the role of fathers in our communities, I'm reminded today, by the way, is my baptism anniversary in 2006. And when I was preparing for this webinar, I remembered how my father was not a regular church person, but on the day of my baptism, he was there. For me, it really spoke volumes that, okay, he's not really a religious person who comes to church every Sunday. He oftenly joked that he attends church when there's weddings or funerals. But for him to really spare that time to come to church with me and witness this amazing journey into my Christianity, it really meant a lot to me. And I'm sure these are some of the things that we aim to see from our father figures. I think Rev, who spoke, I think it was Mr. Mtali or Rev Nathan, who spoke about how, children really need that type of attachment from their fathers, just that presence, even if they're not able to provide financially, but just that father figure in their lives really speaks a lot of volume. Yeah, so I just thought to share this piece of information. And I know there's some colleagues who've been writing messages here. One being Elise, my fellow colleague from Namibia. Thank you for joining us. She wrote that some fathers are really having a raw deal, thinking of those men who work at the sea and would therefore fall under the migrant fathers, would also score little under physical presence because they are oftentimes away from home for long periods and back home for a short period before the cycle continues. And I think some speakers really spoke about the issue around absent fathers. So maybe my fellow panelists, if you can also take note of Elise's contribution here. We do have fathers who are away from home, not because they want to, but because they want to also bring food to the table. But in that manner, they are absent and unable to be there physically to take care of their children's needs. But at the same time, they need to provide financially to the children by being away. So what is the role really for the church to encourage the fathers to be there? Okay, I see hands. I am so, so excited. Let me see. Amu did show me how to. Okay, I'll allow Brett to talk. I'm not sure if I've done this quite well. Please unmute Brett.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you everyone for this. I'm coming from Cape Town in South Africa. It's really cool hearing the different experiences from the different countries and seeing how much we resonate. Also just with the negative things as well. This is obviously a big problem in our various spaces, and it's cool that we can have these connections to try and learn from each other. And so the question that I have is to hear, because I'm with Heartlines, we have a program called Fathers Matter. It's a very effective program once we get in the room with the people, but often the challenge is getting that initial connection. So I'd love to hear some strategies from maybe some of your speakers in terms of how do you get the men initially connected so that you can have that first conversation.
Okay, thank you for that question. I will ask some of my fellow panelists to respond to that. I can also see Rev Nathan, you have your hand up. Please unmute and go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now the issue of some fathers staying away from home, sources of provision and other things. Now, one of the strategies that we teach our fathers is the concept of being present even in absence. A father may be physically away, but when they are emotionally, psychologically present in their family life, because being away may be for work purposes and other things does not mean missing in action. So that strategy of you can be present even in absence. Being away, yes, physically I am away, but my children know where I am, know what I am doing, and know when I'll come back. Technology has simplified issues, speaking to them on phone, doing video calls, but also being accountable. Accountability is very key for that purpose. So that issue of I am away, I would like to be around, but I'm not. Yes, sometimes it's just an excuse because you can be present, emotional presence, psychological presence, even when you're physically away, but being accountable to the family members. Then also the issue of men. Sometimes, so many times, men are found where they are. So fathers are gathered. We share with them what our goals are, what our intentions are. Men, the psychology of men want to associate with people that understand them, people that demonstrate empathy to them, people that demonstrate that they actually know and understand what the men are going through. So that's why we're able to gather them in the different groups, in their churches, in their social clubs, in their community clubs, and engage them for the betterment of fatherhood. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rev, for providing some of these strategies that I'm hoping, Brett, you've been answered a bit on how to get the men involved, or where do you even start? And I'll also ask my panelists before they wrap up to also share some of these strategies. And I also like the work that you're doing as Heartlines on the Father's Matter. I would also encourage colleagues to really check out Heartlines, the amazing work that they do in encouraging positive fatherhood. Mr. Mtali, I see your hand up.
Yes, Paul. In responding to what Madam Erez from Namibia raised,
Yes.
now it gets interesting because as a father, you can be present physically, but emotionally absent, right? Sometimes you can be absent physically, but emotionally present, just like my previous speaker said. But for us, what we encourage, it is not the amount of time, but it is the quality of time that you spend with your children and with your spouse. Because you can be at home the whole day, impacting on nothing, where you're actually present, but literally absent. Because you're not, participating in anything, you're not taking care of anything, you're not talking about anything, you are literally absent. So sometimes it is not about the length of time that you've been there, but the quality of time. In the shortest time that you are with your family, what do you do? So, for example, if you are someone who works around the shores, fishing and doing all that, definitely time comes when you go back home, when you get back home. Say for a week, for argument's sake, for a week. What is it that you do in a week to compensate for the time that you were not there? To compensate for the time that you are, in the shores, fishing and so on and so forth. And that's what really creates impact. Children will get to a point where they will realize that we don't stay with our father, but our father is around. And when he is around, this is what he does. And that's what will build your legacy, in the minds of your children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mtali, because I also think you bring out a very unique case that we have as Africa, where we have, social fathers or fathers who are unemployed. Majority of our fathers, they're in the informal sector. And you also look at policies that speak to parental leave, paternity leave, and you find that there is a bit of a disconnect, and you then wonder, how do we then support, fathers to be present in their children's lives while at the same time providing. So thank you for sharing some of the suggestions and solutions that probably we can look into. And this, if I can also share that this is the first of many series that we will be doing as Sonke and MenCare in Africa. We will be discussing, some of these fatherhood issues that, affect us in Africa. I'm also seeing a comment from Dr. Deliwe where she's saying Vessel can attest to the fact that getting men calls for engagement in spaces where they are, like soccer spaces, taverns, reminding me of how the Fatherhood program started in South Africa. So maybe, Doc Vessel, if you can also share with us, some of the work that we've done, in South Africa, on positive parenting. I know we've done quite a number of work under the MenCare umbrella. So that at least colleagues in the room may know or have an idea of where do we even start. I think there's been talk about mental health for fathers. Where do we get the support? Rev Bafana also spoke about, the church giving us, this role for fathers to be providers and, being supermen, but there isn't much support. Where do men really go to gather that strength? So Dr. Vessel, if you can help us with this.
I I'm I I'm not sure I can help the Paul, but I think it's been a while since I've been directly involved in implementation of projects. So I actually defer to you and to Deliwe and Jean-Marie and other colleagues on the call with more recent experiences. I think two reflections from the work that Sonke has led in South Africa. The one is, as Deliwe says, to meet men where they are at. And in addition to the spaces that Dr. Deliwe mentioned, like the taverns or soccer or sports fields, I would also add government services. So figuring out a way to work with health facilities, with maternal facilities, especially, or antenatal services facilities, so that one can actually work towards embedding that in local budgets that are institutionalized. And then the other one that, the MenCare program in South Africa that Sonke led on, working with social workers and auxiliary social workers, and just training social workers on how to understand fathers and families better. Is a great example of something that might offer solutions at scale. I think at the personal level, the second point I wanted to raise is just that facilitators who come from the neighborhood or outreach colleagues who come from the same community, the same neighborhood, the same church, the same context as respondents, usually is a great way to get started. So one can actually be in touch with people that know each other. I wanted to just mention, Paul, I hope you can post a link to the report in the chat oh, you did post it. Great.
Yes.
So Brett Heartlines was a key partner in the report, and there's actually two case studies in the report from Heartlines, and we cite the films, of course, as a major influence on the narratives of fatherhood in South Africa. So nice to see you on the call again.
No. I've posted the link to the State of South Africa report. Please, if you get time, do go through it. My internet got a bit unstable. I hope you can hear me now. I was saying, if you get time, please go through the website, the link that I posted, to read the State of South Africa Fathers Report. Like Dr. Vessel is saying, there's quite a number of chapters that speak to fatherhood, which are quite informative. So I really, really encourage you to go to that link and download the report. Still open to hear from colleagues on the call before I hand over to my speakers to give us our final thoughts. I can see, Elise, you've been posting quite a number of conversations. Please, if I can allow you to speak and share some of these experiences that you've been posting on the group. Can you please unmute? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry, Paul, I'm running between two meetings. Please just remind me what you want me to say now, because I was a bit focused on the other virtual meeting. Apologies.
Yes, I've seen that you've been posting quite a number of conversations on the group. And I think the last communication that you put, maybe if you can take us through the male champions that you posted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my comment is also derived from the study that ECPAT International did in Namibia, specifically with Lifeline Childline in 2022, where the study focused on services that we render to the boy child when they are violated. And a lot of the questions relates to the presence of the father figure in the boy child's life, but also how do we access these men? So from our, what we shared with them is that we go to where the men are, whether it be at shebeens or soccer or sport, like the Liwe said. But what was also helpful in getting the attention and presence of the men is the fact that we used male champions. So these men are specifically trained to engage with men, other men in the communities on a lot of different topics, whether it be GBV, suicide, parenting, etc. So, and the fact that the ordinary man in the community can associate, if I can put it like that, themselves with a male champion kind of also inspired them to be more like a male champion. So after these sessions, they would always come back and request assistance or information from our male champions about a variety of issues. That includes challenges in parenting, SRHR, and also GBV. So the use of men to engage other men and young boys is for me very key to ensure we get the audience of men. We know it's a very daunting task, but every little bit of best practice shared, I think as a collective would help all of us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Elise, for sharing the insights with Namibia. I know you do a lot of work with engaging religious and traditional leaders in Namibia. The work that you did with the ADA project on linking policy and implementation also spoke volumes to the work that you also link it around the MenCare work in Namibia. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. I don't see any more contributions or hands, so I'm going to ask my panelists to just give us their closing comments and overview of the conversations that we've been having today. So maybe I'll start with Rev BK. Just in your closing, maybe also share with us some religious texts that we can use. I was in a session with young people from Men Engage Africa a few weeks ago where they kept talking about, that scripture that says, spare the rod and spoil the child, is something that, we promote corporal punishment to our children. And I think at that moment, I kind of Bible scripture or, in the Quran can I use to, encourage that positive discipline from us as parents that, the Bible or the religious texts use. So I don't know if you can maybe, or you have any, this also goes to you, Rev Nathan, because I think you are the only faith leaders that I have in this space. In your closing, Rev, in a minute or so.
Thank you very much, Mpho. I do think that it is important that we take, I think, what we are finding through these important reports as nuggets for how we can take this work forward. I also wanted to add, I hope Brett is still here, that there's also work that we have done directly with religious institutions. For instance, most churches have what we call men's groups. You don't need a lot to organize them. You just need to, link up with a local grouping, arrange for your visit. They will always make time available and you can work with those groupings. And it's advantageous because then they are meeting regularly. They are in that particular context, as Vessel has indicated earlier. But we also use what we call our community action team members, who are based in these communities, who mobilize men and galvanize them to attend workshops. It is indeed difficult to get men into these spaces, but once you get them into the space, it's difficult for them to let go. Because once men feel that they are in a space where their issues are being addressed, where someone is listening to them, where someone is willing to give them an opportunity to also be vulnerable, we find that it actually is an exciting engagement with men. I do want to say, Paul, we did allude, I think, in our chapter to numerous examples in the Bible. One that comes to mind is Jesus in the gospel with his statement, leave the children to come unto me. A very profound statement, as you would understand. Jesus, growing up in a Jewish community, which is predominantly patriarchal, basically has no space for children. And Jesus gives what I would call a counter-narrative that undermines that cultural belief by pivoting children to a very high level, including equating children to the kingdom of God. In a sense, Jesus gives special space for children, which was a very powerful message in my view, that, no one can argue against that. And if Jesus saw it, fit that children should be allowed, and be given the freedom and be embraced and be encouraged instead of, be chastised. It's a counter narrative to even those verses where people talk about, sparing the rod, because Jesus is giving us a different approach to these issues, to say what children need really is attention, love, embracing, nurturing, and support. And there's a lot that I think we can get if we follow those good examples. And there are several, verses that we can follow in terms of how Jesus himself carried himself out. I think we made a reference also to the fact that when Jesus is confronted to say, how should we pray? He uses the Aramaic concept of Abba, Father, which is my daddy, and which is almost uncharacteristic for someone to want to refer to God, who is always seen to be aloof, up there, someone to be feared. And Jesus is bringing God closer to people by saying, no, this is your daddy. The concept of daddy is one which is filled with warmth, with love, with accommodation. And those are some of the narratives that we don't often hear in our churches, and yet they are presented very forthrightly. And I think we need to draw on many of those so that we can build this notion of what fatherhood is about. And we make an example also about how Jesus, calls on us as men to carry ourselves, including on gender issues, how Jesus challenges the cultural practices that undermines, the other, and actually talks about the need for dignity, for treating everyone, with respect. And there are many of these narratives, and this is part of the work that we try to do in our engagement in our programs. So I do think that there's a lot for us to take forward in ensuring that we build a different understanding of fatherhood and manhood in our society that is not embedded on fear, on power and violence and overbearing, but on nurturing, on caring, on treating others fairly and with dignity and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rev, for that beautiful final reflection. I'm cautious about time that we only have a minute to go before we end the webinar, but I'd really love to have the final parting words from our speakers, Rev Nathan. So if you can be patient with us for 5 more minutes while we wind up and hear the closing remarks from our speakers. Over to you, Rev Nathan.
Yes, thank you very much. My parting shots, one is let's continue leveraging on religion and culture as we promote fatherhood in our communities. This morning I've been enjoying and making other people feel bad, and I told them that it is only us religious leaders, it's only us, the religious institutions, that have a right to speak to fathers, and those fathers will not object, or the fathers will not say anything. It is us with the total authority. So if the religious leaders we stood up and came to our position and held our position as far as fatherhood is concerned, then that would be good. Number two, integration of fatherhood in all activities that we do, integration of men and boys in all programming, and definitely working as a team, sharing experiences in our different countries to ensure that we have safe fatherhood. Otherwise, all of us are going to hide a pay due to the fatherhood vacuum. If not, we are already paying badly due to the fatherhood vacuum in our families. The number of children in alcohol, the number of children struggling with the drugs, the number of children struggling with identity issues, the number of children that are committing suicide, the number of children that are nowhere in life, the number of children that are dropping out of school, it all has an attachment to absent fathers and fatherhood vacuum. So let's do whatever we can to make sure that fatherhood rises again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rev, for this insight. Over to you, Mr. Mtali.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think one or two things. Number one, that we must find space, to fill these men and really understand their situations. Because like the Reverend mentioned, if not Bafana mentioned earlier on, some men have found themselves in very difficult situations where they need to provide for their families, but at the same time, they need to be present. So we need to find a way of helping these men to be absent physically, yes, but present in the lives of their children. Number two, that we also need to understand, men as men, and as in who a man really is. Because men are grappling with issues of negative notions of masculinity, where they need to prove, to be man enough, thereby risking their lives. We've seen that happening. And we really need to sit down and listen to them. If anything, men will be very interested to sit down and listen to someone who really talks about issues that affect them. In our churches and mosques, people are tired listening about Jesus is coming. People know Jesus is coming, but they also want to see how best they can navigate, their relationships as they wait for Jesus Christ to come. So it is also important to look at how we relate to each other, fathers and their children, husbands and their wives, in the communities that we stay. How can we live in harmony? And I think it begins with understanding each other, that as a man, what are these things that a man really wants to see happening, and how we can help them to be the best of what they can be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mtali, for this reflection. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Vessel, over to you.
Sure, a quick one. Thanks, Paul. I think to the facilitators and the people working with men in groups out there, there's an exercise called My Father's Legacy, where we ask participants, tell me about your father and what you want to take forward. And we often hear the story, there was no one there. So I would just suggest adding the question, who was there? Was there an uncle? Was there a grandfather? Was there a pastor? And what would you take forward from their influence in your life? Thanks, Paul.
No, thank you so much, Vessel, for this insight. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for staying and contributing to this webinar, our first ever webinar for MenCare in Africa. We will be surely sharing with you more updates on more webinars that we'll be hosting. So please do keep your eyes on the lookout. Please also do look out for the link that I shared of the report where these conversations were being based on the State of South Africa Fathers Report. And like I mentioned, this is the 3rd edition. And also just to share that we do have several African-based State of Fathers reports, which is the State of Tanzania, State of Uganda, State of Zimbabwe, State of Rwanda, and State of South Africa. So we have 5 fatherhood country reports that you can go on to our Sonke Gender Justice website. You'll be able to find them and download them and just see the comparison that we have cut across these 5 countries. So for now, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be in touch. And happy Holy Week, and have restful and enjoyable Easter holidays. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, thank you, team. Until next time, have a good time.
Thank you. Happy Holy Week, Rev. Thank you, Dr. Deliwe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, JM. Thank you so much. And thank you, Amo, in absentia. Thank you, Dr. Jacob. Thank you so much.